introduce to you Ann Gass.
I'm going to start by reading a poem, and I have to have you sort of picture Florence, who was my great-grandmother, reciting this poem in 1917 to the Judiciary Committee at the legislature, which of course would have all been men at that point. And she says to them, "I have no quarrel with you, but I stand for the clear right to hold my life my own, the clean, clear right, to mold it as I will, not as you will, with or apart from you, to make of it a thing of brain and blood, of tangible substance and of turbulent thought, no thin, gray shadow of the life of man. Your love perchance may place a crown upon it, but I may crown myself in other ways, as you have done who are one flesh with me. I have no quarrel with you, but henceforth this you must know. The world is mine, as yours, the pulsing strength and passion and heart of it, the work I set my hand to, women's work, because I set my hand to it." So I'd like to start with that poem because it just captures the essence of Florence Brooks Whitehouse, who set her hands to many things over her lifetime, including being a writer and an artist, a feminist and a suffrage leader, also a peace activist, a deeply spiritual person, and a devoted wife and mother. She was a person who, at a time when society kind of offered women's life crumbs, demanded a seat at the table and a menu of her own. She was a force, and she didn't like narrow societal expectations. So my goal tonight is to introduce you to her and persuade you that she really was, at least in this period of 1914 to 1920, a preeminent suffrage leader in Maine, and deserves much more recognition than she has received up to this point for the work that she did. And she later also helped to support Maine's efforts to pass the Equal Rights Amendment up until at least the 1930s. She was inducted, even though she was kind of forgotten by history, and I'll touch on that a little bit later, she was inducted into the Maine Women's Hall of Fame in 2008 for her contributions to women's civic and social equality. And she is the subject of my book. I had to do a lot of research on her because when I started, the family even had forgotten a lot of this information. I knew growing up that she was a suffragist. I knew that she had been an artist. We had books, so I knew that she was a novelist as well. But that was about it. That was really all I knew about her. And so when I started looking, of course, I went through the Maine histories and about women's suffrage in this state, and a lot of what was written was kind of schlocky, honestly. It was just not very well researched. And she, seemed to have a very minor role. She was portrayed as a rabble-rouser and a fringe kind of pain in the neck. But I had started to look through her papers, which were at the Maine Historical Society. My aunt had donated them there, and I had seen enough from an early stage to know that that wasn't true. She was in the thick of it. So what was going on here? And I finally realized that it was because that when suffrage was won, the more conservative suffragists were the ones who wrote the history of suffrage in their states, and they simply left her out of it. So that really made me mad. So I had to do a lot of research after that, and I went to, I started with her papers at the Maine Historical Society, and anybody can go look at those. I also went to the Library of Congress, which has the papers for the two national women's suffrage associations that were active at the time. I looked at Portland's newspapers from 1913 to 1920, also the Lewiston Journal and the Kennebec Journal, and during that time period, the University of Maine, Orono, and the State Archives. So it took me 15 years off and on. So I did a lot of work on it. But, so I'm going to talk a little bit about her background, her childhood. I think that her early years, she didn't get started as a suffrage leader until she was in her 40s. So she did a lot of other things first, and that really contributed to her being a very effective suffrage leader later on. So she was born in Augusta. This was her childhood home at 7 Spruce Street. And she was the fourth of 5 children and the family's first girl. This is her father, Samuel Spencer Brooks, who was a pretty prosperous businessman in Augusta. He had a hardware store, I think, down on Water Street, and he dabbled in shipbuilding. He was, he's a business guy. He did a lot of different stuff. Her mother, Mary Caroline Wadsworth Brooks, was somewhat related to the Henry Wadsworth Longfellow family. So that may have been in part what sparked her interest in writing from an early age. So that's her younger sister, Marguerite or Daisy. So she went to public school in Augusta, and for high school she went to St. Catherine's Hall, which is a finishing school in Augusta, affiliated with the Episcopal Church. It's no longer running as it's now a hospital up there or something. But she spent a lot of her summers on Squirrel Island and off the coast of Boothbay Harbor. Her family was one of the early families to buy into this, what became a flourishing summer colony, started in the 1870s. And so here she is. This is Florence here, and there's Daisy. And actually, that's their father, Percy. And let's see, I can tell you the names of some of these other people. There's Molly Ingraham, Stanley Patton, Marion Haynes, Arthur Parsons, and Annie Treat. Any of those names? Not a good name. I'm going to keep trying to find out if there's anybody in Maine related to any of these people, because I don't really know who they are.
How old was she at that time? About 20. Yeah,
she was born in 1869, so she was about 17, I think. I'm sort of guessing. So, are there any Squirrel Islanders here? Yeah, that's what I'm thinking is. So, Squirrel, I love these pictures. They're not really germane to her suffrage history, but so often we see people in history as their adult, grown-up, stuffy selves, and it's just really fun to see some of these photos of them running around Squirrel in a pack, which, incidentally, I did a pack about 11. I was there this summer to do a talk, and they still do that. It was kind of fun to see. So anyway, here she is, around 1890. So I think it looks like maybe she's graduated from her school at that time. She could have gone to, I'm sure she could have gone to a women's college had she chosen to, but she was a very independent person, and she decided she would much rather go to Boston and study music and languages and art, painting. And so that's what she did for the next couple of winters. Then she'd come back up and spend the summers on Squirrel. And, here she is with some other friends a little bit later, actually. But in 1892, she decided to take an extended trip abroad, and so she was gone for close to 2 years, and she went to all over Europe and to the Holy Lands and to the art centers of the Syria and Egypt. She spent an entire winter sailing up and down the Nile with the McCormick family, whose ancestor had invented the reaper. And so they had a lot of money, and I don't know how she hooked up with them, but she was by herself. She was traveling by herself, I think, and so she just kind of hooked up with them. They had a daughter who was an invalid, and so then maybe they took her on board to keep the daughter company. But there's a family story that her future husband heard that she was being romanced by somebody on this trip, and he sailed to Egypt and brought her home, brought her back to Maine. I don't know if that's true, but it's a fun story. And in any case, she did come back to Maine and marry Robert Whitehouse, Robert Treat Whitehouse. He's on the right there. This is around the time they got married. And he was also from Augusta. His dad was the Chief Justice of the Maine Supreme Court. Somebody she'd probably known since childhood, had probably gone to school with him. His family, through his uncle, also had property on Squirrel. So she would have known him forever. And here's another, I love this photo. It looks like he's choking her. That's Percy, her brother. I think he's just forcing her chin around to look at the camera. And there's Robert to her left. And I don't know who that other person is there in the back, but they're on Squirrel. I think that they had a very egalitarian relationship, she and Robert. I honestly think after 4 years of relative freedom, she wouldn't have settled for anything less than that. And they had a blast. But they got married, moved to Portland. His mom helped them buy a house at 42 Deering Street, which is in Portland's Parkside neighborhood now. And so they start out, of course, they don't have kids yet, so they can do whatever they want. And one of the things they did was he went into private practice, and she started a writers group, and also joined the Rossini Club, which is still a music club that's still active in Portland. But together, they collaborated on writing, directing, and performing in plays, which they put on from Portland on up the coast to Buffet Harbor and beyond. This is one they did that was called the House Party. This is the front, of the program, and they put them on for charity. But out of this came the seeds of her novels, actually, her first novel. Once the kids started coming, which they did around 1896 or 8 or something. Actually, no, I've got it written down here. Yeah, William Penn was 1895, that's right. Robert Treat was 1897, and then my grandfather was born in 1904. So she published her first book in 1902. That was The God of Things. And here she is with her kids. This is my